Welcome to DT Kane's Epic Fantasy Book Club. I'm DT Kane, author of the epic fantasy series The Aggresfar Saga and the spoken books Uprising. Each week, I read from one of my novels, discuss my writing process, answer your questions, and have general discussions about fantasy fiction. It's like a book club, except I do all the work for you. Find show notes, info about all my novels, and much more at dtkane.com. Here's the show. Chapter 36. Del was so fixated on seeing the legendary hidden Vanjo in the flesh that the soldier's words only partly registered. Like his men, the general wore a sword, though his was a scimitar, the slender scabbard curving like a dying man's last smile. Its worn poplar handle shone, polished from long years of handling. They called the sword Death, for if you ever saw it drawn, you were sure to witness a life taken, whether someone else's or your own. "Marquis," snapped the soldier, "you will acknowledge the Supreme Commander's will and relinquish your brute to us." The edge to the man's tone finally drew Del's attention away from Vanjo. The general hadn't moved so much as a fingertip the entire time Del had been staring at him. "There must be some misunderstanding, my good man. I am here on official business, representing Erstwhile at the Congress that starts tomorrow. Why, I was escorted here by Duke Farston Liamina himself. Are you saying you refuse to comply with the general's command?" The hands of the 9 other soldiers fell to their sword hilts nearly in unison. "Of course not," Del said hurriedly. "It's just snrack." The sound came from over Del's shoulder. He knew what it meant, but before he could do anything about it, every soldier drew 10 polished lengths of steel, whispering promises of pain as they left their sheaths. "Rocks!" Del spun to his Harbour. "Put that thing away! What are you going to do? Carve up the indomitable army right smack in the middle of the reading district? You think that will do anything to keep me from harm?" Rox didn't immediately drop his razor, but he blinked at Del from over the edge of his face mask, and his chalky skin actually displayed some color. He folded the weapon back into its one-handed position and lowered it. "Drop it, now!" cried the lead soldier. Del stepped between the soldier and Rox. "Now, hold on, Captain." He was a little murky on his military insignias. All they had in Erstwhile was the Conservator militia and Harbours, but the man had 4 slashes of gold on one shoulder, which he was pretty sure signified captain. "If you're going to seize my—" Del frowned. He disliked thinking of Rox's property, even if that's what the law classified him as. After all, Rox was no speaker. "If you're going to seize my Harbour, I have a right to know why." "Not after your property attempted to—" The captain's jaws snapped shut like a sprung trap, body stiffening to attention. General Vanjo had raised an arm into the air, fingers together, palm facing out. He made a series of hand signals to the captain, who immediately bowed, then turned back to Del. "The Supreme Commander says I have acted brashly, and I will punish myself later. Forgive me, Marquis." The captain bowed to Del, and his words sounded entirely earnest, as if the simple wave of a hand from hidden Vanjo was capable not just of imparting commands, but actually changing a man's outlook on things. Only the captain's eyes showed any sign of uncertainty, cloudy and confused, as if he wasn't certain where the words he'd just spoken had come from. "The charge is simple," the captain continued, his eyes snapping back into focus from their momentary glaze of befuddlement. "Your Harbour entered the city without proper licensure. All such possessions must be properly certified before entry into the city." "Oh," Del said, letting out a relieved breath. Erstwhile actually had a similar requirement. They should have been stopped at the city gates, but what with the influx of people here for the Congress, ordinary procedure must have fallen by the wayside. Is that all? Well, just point me in the direction of the forms I need to sign, and the tax collector I need to pay, Dell added with a grin. Can't forget the city's take now, can we? Was all, this? He twirled a finger around in the air to indicate the soldiers. Really necessary? Begging your pardon, of course, General Vanjo. Dell bowed to the Supreme Commander. The captain looked at Dell as if he'd just said something foolish. It isn't that simple, Marquis. There's forms, yes, but then the underwriting process takes several days at a minimum, and if additional information is needed, it could go on even longer. You may start now, of course, but meanwhile we can't have an unlicensed Harbour going about the city. Come now, that's ridiculous, Dell said. Have you spoken to Duke Leomina? I'm sure he'd authorize an exception. We did speak to him, actually, the captain said. Was that a hint of derision in his tone at mention of the Duke? He's the one who alerted us to the presence of an unlicensed Harbour within the city limits. He came to us personally, not 20 minutes past. That snake! Dell's hand flew to his own sword belt, though his arm only made it about halfway before a flicker of motion drew his attention. Dell's legs turned to water. The general's hand had moved to rest on the hilt of death. Dell threw his hands into the air and took a step back. Rox gave a disconcerted grunt from beside him, but even the big man knew better than to show open hostility toward Hedon Vanjo. I meant no disrespect, General. Please, forgive my impertinence. Of course, you'll have to secure my Harbour until such time as I'm able to complete the certification process. Turning to Rox, he said in a much quieter tone, Sorry, old chum, but as you can see, there's little I can do. Rox's eyes narrowed toward the guards for a moment, but then he nodded. He turned to Dell and knelt down on one knee, which put the towering man about eye level with Dell. Remember, little Dell, remember the truth. The words mean what they mean. Then the giant did something he'd never done before. He pulled Dell into an embrace. It was only the briefest of things, though it still left Dell feeling as if every rib in his body had been broken. Dell coughed furiously as Rox released him and rose. Your razor, the captain said. Hand it over. Rox glanced down to his weapon, then back up to the captain, a glower plain on his face, even with the mask covering most of it. The captain shifted his weight uncomfortably under that glare. After several moments of silence, Rox unshouldered the weapon and held it out to Dell. What do you want me to do with that? Rox said nothing, just holding it out until Dell began to worry Vanjo might draw his sword if they waited any longer. He snatched the razor from Rox and nearly fell over. Torn pages! The thing weighed more than a loaded book pack. Rox turned away from Dell without a backward glance and was immediately swarmed by the soldiers, who clasped irons that likely would have fit Dell's waist around Rox's wrists. The giant put up no resistance, and before Dell had even managed to shift the massive weapon to a manageable position, Rox was already several dozen paces away, half a dozen drawn swords pointed at his back. Dell stared after the departing soldiers for several moments before realizing he hadn't been left alone. The general still stood there, barely farther than an arm's reach away. Vanjo lifted a hand with 2 fingers extended, pointing to the eye sockets of his mask, then ran one finger over the tear engraved on the face covering. Dell's throat suddenly felt as if it had been plugged by tar, and Rox's razor went tumbling from his arms to the cobbles. The Supreme Commander turned and followed after his men with a slow, deliberate cadence, and Dell could do nothing but stare until he was lost in the crowd. Then Dell crumbled to the ground like a vine cut from a tree, bottom hitting the cobbles with a thump. His hands were shaking to such an extent he had to stick them beneath his arms to still them. He had no idea what Vanjo's gesture had meant, but any showing of negativity at all from such a man could only mean trouble of the worst kind. Del sat there on the ground in the middle of the reading district for several minutes. Many a passer-by eyed him askance, but with his plumed hat no one dared question his intentions. Finally, with hands still shaking, he pushed himself upright and hoisted Rox's razor off the ground, cradling it in his arms like a dead body. Objectively, he knew he needed to do something to get Rox freed, but in his mind there was only one thing he could think of. He needed a drink. No, many drinks. All right, DT crew, welcome back to DT Kane's Epic Fantasy Book Club. Today is April 16th, 2023, as I record this, which is episode number 33 of Season 2 of the podcast, and episode number 60 overall. Just a short episode this week, but wanted to make sure I didn't leave you with anything 2 weeks in a row. We just read chapter 36 of Declaimer's Discovery, and the plot continues to thicken here. Now, Del is without not only his speaker, but Rox has also been taken away from him, apparently at Duke Farston's prompting. He turned Del in for having an unlicensed harbor in the city, which, I don't know about you, but kind of sounds like a trumped-up charge to me, especially for someone who is supposed to be an important representative at this upcoming Congress meeting. But there you go. So Del is alone in this unfamiliar city now, and you can probably imagine that things are not going to go well for him from here, but we'll have to wait and see until next time when we read chapter 37 of Declaimer's Discovery. Just a few quick updates here this week. I am back, obviously, from my birthday photography vacation. Thanks, everyone who sent me birthday wishes. The actual day was this past Tuesday, April 11th. Had a good time. I just went home to Rochester, New York, which is where I am originally from, and hung out with some friends and family, and like I said, took lots of photos with the camera I was renting. So good times. I'll be sharing some of my favorite photos from that week in the newsletter over the coming weeks. So if you are not a newsletter subscriber, consider signing up over at dtkane.com. The newsletter sign up is just on the right-hand page there. Or you can go to email, or you can go to dtkane.com/email-sign-up, and you'll go right to the sign-up page. Let's see here. I haven't given a update on my writing in a few weeks, I don't think. So I am continuing to work my way through Part 6 of the Spoken Books Uprising, which I'll be calling Fire and Ink. And I did share a little bit about the plot of this next upcoming installment. There might be some mild spoilers here if you are not up to date with the reading, so you may just want to tune out for about the next 30 seconds if you do not want to hear. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so in Part 6, Baz will be returning to Erstwhile to warn his brother of the news he learned in Book 5, which was Into the Dragon's Maw. Remember, Tax returned to Erstwhile after Part 4 to start the new government in Erstwhile that was agreed to in the treaty with the Conservators after the Battle of the Frost. In Part 6, Baz will reunite with some old friends in Erstwhile, and they'll hatch a plot to steal something that is dear to the Conservatory. Of course, that means he'll be seeing plenty of Lyanna, who is now a master restorer of the Conservators in Erstwhile. You'll recall that she led the plot of the Conservatory in Part 4, and she's in charge of the Conservatory here now. Of course, Baz's old feelings for her will inevitably once more rise to the surface, so we'll see how that relationship between them develops in part 6. And of course, it's going to be a heist story, so it wouldn't be a heist without loads of things going wrong. So get ready for a wild ride this summer when part 6 of the Spoken Books Uprising will be coming to a bookstore near you, or at least a e-bookstore near you. I'm about 70,000 words into the draft right now, and I don't even think I'm halfway through it, actually. So this is probably going to be the longest book in the series. So I hope you are all looking forward to it. I am diligently working my way through it. There's a lot of new characters in this one, so my writing has been a little slower as I kind of flesh out those character motivations. It's frankly been a little frustrating for me with how slow it's going. But I just had to keep reminding myself that in the end, all this advanced planning that I'm doing will make for a richer story for all of you in the end. So just bear with me. Hoping to get that out by the middle of the summer, but with how long it's shaping up to be, who knows? But rest assured, I am working on it. Let's see. I also shared some of my birthday reflections in the newsletter this week. I guess I'll share that here too. I'll just read it. Just trying to be a little open and honest here with everyone. So I hope you appreciate my journal entry like posting here, but maybe just giving you a little insight into my thought processes and how I got to where I am right now with my writing. So I turned 36 this past Tuesday, which again was April 11th. Looking back, I have a lot to be proud of, including an advanced degree, good job, loving wife, and a nice house. I certainly do not deny that I am blessed in many ways. But that said, several years ago, I realized I wasn't really getting everything out of life that I wanted. And while I had done a lot that I think, objectively speaking, most people would say made me successful, I didn't feel particularly accomplished, which, if you've ever been in that position where you are doing something that you're good at but don't particularly like it, you can probably relate to that. You kind of feel guilty because you're like, well, I'm doing, quote, well, but, I'm not happy. Why am I feeling so ungrateful? But, just because you're necessarily good at something doesn't necessarily mean it's what you should be doing. And that's kind of the position I found myself in several years ago. So that's when I started pursuing this whole writing thing, which is, a dream I'd always had, but I would probably say, sometime in grade school, I kind of just figured, well, that's not something you can make a job out of, right? Or, that's only something famous people do. So, I kind of set that aside for a really long time. So, but no, I picked it up again because I knew something needed to change. So I started writing Blade Sorrow, which is the first book I ever published, which is available on Amazon if you're interested in reading that. It's in the same universe as the Spoken Books Uprising, but it takes place much, much later in a time where books are no longer necessary to cast magic. If you're interested in that, you can go check that out over on Amazon, or you can go over to my website, ddkane.com. But after I started that, a couple years after I started taking my writing a little more seriously, I changed jobs to a less demanding one. I'm still to this day not in a position where I can support myself with just my writing, but I changed a job, took that paid a little less, still plenty, but paid less than the one I had then, but it was much less demanding, so I had more time to work on my writing each day, and probably that was one of the most important things I did for that transition, and also just forming the discipline to sit down and write each day. I try to not have any 0 days. I call them, something productive each day as far as my writing goes. Maybe that isn't even necessarily getting words done on a page, but thinking about something or reading something about the craft of writing that will help advance you, but just doing something each and every day. though getting your butt in the chair and getting the words out is certainly important as well. And that's really, obviously there's a lot more that I did in there, but that's kind of a really high level. I don't know if I'm ever going to be a famous author, but I am pretty proud of the progress I have made in my writing the past, I guess it's been like 5 years now, 5 or 6 years since I started taking it really seriously. And the fact that I've released 6 novels now is probably one of the things I'm most proud of in my life to this point, and I think what I'm doing now is the definition of success, or at least the definition of success that I strive for. But just trying each day to achieve something that brings you joy. I think if you can look back at the end of a day and say, I was at least trying to move the ball forward to do something that I actually really want to be doing. I think that's a successful day, and if you do that throughout your life, I would say you've had a successful life. So you certainly don't have to adopt my definition of success, but I thought I would share that with you in case it gives anyone out there a needed dose of inspiration if you happen to be in a position like I was. And, I certainly haven't arrived either. I have to work my day job to support myself. Still, though I think I've shared this on the podcast before, I like to think of it as I am my own patron. Back in the medieval times or the Renaissance, people had patrons who, or artists, I should say, had patrons who, supported them so that they could make their art. Well, I am supporting myself with my day job so I can make my art. So I like to think of whenever I'm feeling down about my day job, I just tell myself, well, that's how I patronize myself. Just like, Leonardo da Vinci had his patrons back in the Renaissance times or something like that. So there you go. I think I've rambled on enough about that. And I guess I should just add, I do very much appreciate all of you listeners out there and all of my readers who have followed me along on this journey. It certainly makes it easier to go on each day knowing there are people out there who enjoy my writing and are waiting eagerly for the next book. So if you have ever thought that maybe you would send an email to me, or it doesn't happen to just be me, or any other author who you enjoy reading, and you thought, no, that's silly. I am telling you definitively it is not silly. We authors love to get those nice little notes from people who like what we're doing. Writing is a kind of by definition a solo pursuit, and sometimes it can be lonely, and you can get a little lost in your own head. So hearing from someone from the outside world just with a few kind words is quite helpful. So go ahead and send those emails to the authors that you like. There are plenty of ways to support us without spending a dime, and that is certainly one of them. A few kind words via email. Okay, now my rambling is really over. Next week, like I said, we're going to be reading Chapter 37 of Declaimer's Discovery. Del is going to get drunk and speak some truths like Rox told him to. So tune in for the next episode. And until then, this has been D.T. Kane's Epic Fantasy Book Club. Thanks for listening to D.T. Kane's Epic Fantasy Book Club. If you liked today's episode, please consider rating and reviewing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and hit that subscribe button and the bell so you get notified whenever new episodes become available. If you'd like to listen to back episodes or review the show notes, visit dtkane.com/podcast. D.T. Kane's novels are available for purchase at most major online retailers, or you can purchase directly from his website at www.dtkane.com/books. You can receive a free short story and sign up for D.T. Kane's mailing list at dtkane.com/email-signup. If you'd like to connect, you can find D.T. Kane on Facebook at D.T. Kane Author or Twitter at D.T. Kane Author, or send D.T. Kane an email at dtkane@dtkane.com. See you next week.